Welcome to the channel. Today we're traveling deep into the medieval heart of Europe, Cologne, to uncover the layers of one of Christianity's most peculiar and powerful legends, that of Saint Ursula and her 11,000 virgin companions. But who was Ursula? Did she actually exist, or was she invented to fill a spiritual void? And how did a somewhat obscure martyrdom story transform into a cult that shaped civic identity, religious practice, female spirituality, and even artistic production across Europe? From Roman inscriptions and reliquaries to Gothic altars and pilgrimage, this is the extraordinary story of Saint Ursula. To understand Ursula's rise to prominence, we need to begin not in legend but in stone. Around the 7th or 8th century, a Latin inscription from a man named Clematius was found in Cologne. It reads, "Hic requiescant ex MVA." This cryptic phrase likely meant, "Here rest 11 martyr virgins." But over the centuries, the XIM-phi was misinterpreted and ballooned into 11,000 virgin martyrs. Out of this number confusion grew a mythical backstory. According to later accounts, Ursula was a British princess from Cologne who embarked on a pilgrimage to Rome with thousands of noble virgins. On their way home, they were captured by Huns camped near Cologne and slaughtered for refusing to abandon their Christian faith. It's a powerful tale of piety and resistance, but also one with no historical grounding. Still, in times of insecurity, plague and social instability, legends like this served a purpose. They gave hope. They inspired faith. At first, the cult revolved simply around the idea of anonymous virgin martyrs. Ursula herself wasn't the original star. But over time, she absorbed other figures and legends, effectively becoming the spiritual nucleus. For example, early martyrs, like Pinoza and Cordula, were later integrated into her orbit. Cordula, according to legend, initially hid in fear, only to later embrace martyrdom with newfound courage, a spiritual metaphor in itself. New relics were discovered, sometimes due to convenient excavation, other times through visions. These discoveries expanded the scope of Ursula's cult and legitimized it with sacred bones. Ursula also gained a fictional husband, Aetherius, and her story increasingly reflected the spiritual interests of cloistered women and urban clergy. It was in the 10th century that Archbishop Gero commissioned the first written version of her story, the Passio Ursulae. A second, more elaborate version emerged in the 11th century, commissioned by the convent of Saint Ursula itself. The Passio Ursulae became the foundational text for the saint's cult. But more than that, it became a living document, one that invited new interpretations, insertions, and embellishments. Cologne soon emerged as a spiritual capital of Ursula's story. Pilgrims from across Europe flocked to her church, drawn by promises of relics, healing, and salvation. Outside Cologne, the story morphed and expanded. Clerics, poets, and chroniclers in Italy, France, and beyond added their own spin. The 13th century Legenda Aurea, a kind of medieval bestseller, enshrined Ursula's tale across the Latin Christian world. What makes this extraordinary is not just the tale itself, but the broad appeal it had across different social groups. So who exactly venerated Ursula, and why? The clergy promoted Ursula to reinforce orthodoxy, especially her virginity and martyrdom. She was a moral model, a liturgical figure, and a preacher's favorite. Nunneries, especially the one built in her name in Cologne, saw her as a kindred spirit. Female religious communities organized daily masses in her honor, processed with her relics, and adopted her as a spiritual role model. Artists turned her legend into a visual feast: poems, hymns, frescoes, panel paintings, and statues. They turned Ursula's legend into art, lavish, sweeping cycles that guided the soul and educated the eye. Laypeople, especially urban citizens, embraced her through religious guilds or brotherhoods. These were groups of non-clerical men and women who gathered for prayer, charity, and public worship. Interestingly, some even exercised control over the hiring of their priests and preachers, making them early examples of lay religious self-governance. Finally, pilgrims, rich and poor, male and female, visited her shrine in search of healing, absolution, or simply spiritual reassurance. In Cologne, Ursula was more than a saint. She was a symbol of civic identity. Her image adorned coins, stained glass windows, and even the city's coat of arms. She was invoked during times of crisis, such as the siege of Cologne in 1205 by Philip of Swabia as a heavenly protector. The Annalide, a poetic chronicle from the 11th century, lists Ursula's martyrs alongside great saints like Saint Maurice, placing Cologne among the most sacred cities in Christendom. City councils held special Ratsmessen, masses of the council, in her name. Her feast day on October 21st was marked by processions, liturgies, and even wheat distributions to the poor. As a city, Cologne proudly proclaimed, "She belongs to us." So what did Ursula mean to her followers? Religiously, she was an example of idealized Christian virtue, obedient, courageous, pure. Socially, her cult brought together people from all walks of life, forming spiritual communities in time of intense uncertainty. Locally, she embodied the identity and pride of Cologne as a city. Politically, she offered legitimacy, prestige, and a spiritual defense shield, especially in the volatile world of medieval city-states. Saint Ursula may never have lived, but her story lived powerfully. She inspired devotion, pilgrimage, art, and city pride. In an age without mass media, her cult was a spiritual network that connected people across class, gender, and geography. And in Cologne, she remains, physically through relics and churches, and symbolically in the heart of the city's culture. If you enjoyed this deep dive into medieval spirituality and social history, give this video a like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments which saint or legend should we explore next.